Hello everyone, my name is Koromane Koroye and you are tuned into The Next Wave, brought to you by Tekaba. In the last episode, we spoke about the rise of Africa's super apps, what factors are speeding up their uptake, and the potential for new entrants. Today, we will be speaking about the Metaverse. The Metaverse is one of the most exciting new trends of the decade. And although some think it's just a trend that won't make much of a difference, others think otherwise. With the interest and investment it is gathering globally, it makes sense that startups and big tech companies are keen on it and the possibilities that can come out of blending the digital world with real-life environments in their platforms and products. But perhaps an important place to begin all conversations on the Metaverse is in asking this: what exactly is a metaverse and why should Africans care about it? What problems will it solve that existing technologies aren't solving? And what is the impact or the potential impact on Africa's digital economy? Joining me to discuss this today are Judith Okonkwo, founder of Imisi 3D, Osinachi, African NFT artist, and McMahon, CEO of Africa Rare and co-CEO of Singularity U, South Africa. Hi, Osinachi, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, how are you?
Great, thank you. So, as an NFT artist, I would like to first start off by asking you to clear some myths, right? Since you're an NFT artist, it means that you exist in some way in the digital world, right? So can you just start by talking to us about what the Metaverse means, right? There's a lot of confusion around it, but there's also a lot of active participation as we're seeing. So share with us, in your own opinion and from your own experience, what exactly is the Metaverse?
Well, to put simply, the Metaverse is a virtual world where you can exist as though you were existing in your real life, right? So you can form connections with people on the Metaverse. You can go for events in the Metaverse. You can do a lot of things in the Metaverse. It incorporates a lot of things also, from real estate to fashion, because of course you have to wear something in the Metaverse, right? To art, which brings about NFTs and the rest of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so you spoke about real estate, right? And we know that MTN Nigeria bought some plots of land on the Metaverse, right? In your own opinion, do you think there's a scenario where the Metaverse could become home to not just businesses, but even individuals as well, particularly young Africans, right, who are finding their way and navigating their way, you know, using technology, who are trying to get into the ecosystem, right? What are your thoughts on that? You know, businesses getting on the Metaverse and even individuals buying real estate on the Metaverse?
Yeah, that is already happening. Like you mentioned, there are companies or institutions that are already setting up a presence in the Metaverse. We're going to be seeing that happening. So probably in the future, you'll have a company say, hey, you can visit our customer care service in this Metaverse world and we'll attend to you, and that sort of thing. So it is going to be a very important aspect of our life, and people, of course, would come out and brag and say, hey, I own so-and-so parcel or so-and-so plot on this Metaverse world.
So when we're thinking about technologies such as what exists or what is being currently used to build the Metaverse, right, we use the word innovative. As a digital artist, can you talk about the role innovation plays in not just putting yourself on the Metaverse, whether it's by actively participating or buying land? Can you talk about the role that innovation plays in just existing in this other world, outside of our real world?
I think innovation is about uniqueness, right? And what it brings to me as a form of idea is that each person will bring their own uniqueness to the Metaverse, whether you are doing it from behind the scenes as a tech person or you're actually participating as someone who maybe has a VR headset and connects to the Metaverse. You know, it's about uniqueness. But in this uniqueness also, there's a shared identity, right? For example, Africans, for example, a group of artists, for example, art lovers, right? And with these shared identities will come certain needs that individuals or groups have, and that will bring the innovation. For example, there's a need to hang artworks in a particular Metaverse world, and it leads to the innovation, of course, building something that would allow for that. Yeah. There's a need for this, there's a need for that, and that's how it happens.
So my final question to you is about intellectual property or protecting your IP, right? And we know that there have been cases where NFT artists have experienced people impersonating their work and going, as far as actually stealing their work. So where the metaverse is concerned, can you talk about your experience with selling and protecting your IP in a digital world?
Well, as an artist, I would say that your voice speaks for you in terms of your style speaks for you, right? If you're an artist and who you haven't put out NFTs before, it is possible for people to impersonate you, right, or steal your work and try to sell it to collectors on the blockchain. Even if you are still there, it is possible for people to try to do that. What it brings about is, what it means is that collectors have to do their due diligence, right? You have to do your due diligence in terms of checking and ensuring that the person you're actually trying to buy from is the original artist, right? As an artist, when I'm putting my work on the blockchain, I use just one Ethereum address because I do it on Ethereum mostly. One Ethereum address. So if you see any work minted using that Ethereum address, it means that this is really Osinachi who has put out this work. Now, if you see another address, you have to ask questions, right? And you know that this work is by Osinachi or is being claimed to be by Osinachi. You have to ask questions as a collector. Also, as a collector, some collectors prefer, in fact, to go with NFT marketplaces that are called closed or curated. What it means is that the NFT marketplace have actually done the job of scrutinizing and screening these artists before letting them come onto their platform to mint their artwork. So works there are more trusted, right? While in open platforms, for example, like OpenSea, they are giving what is called stickers to verified artists. So it's like when you're on Instagram and you have a blue tick, and people know that this is really the person that I want to see, right? And these are ways that people are actually getting by the whole thing. But of course, even with that, we still have cases of theft and people stealing other people's work to sell and all that. But it is reducing with the way things are going.
That's great. So, some key things to remember is to ask questions and ensure that whoever it is that you're buying from is verified.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now we're going to move on to Judith. And my question for you, Judith, is how soon can Africa catch up with the metaverse wave sweeping across the globe? What are the barriers that exist, especially in delicate areas like regulation, as we've seen in cases of new technologies such as cryptocurrency? Are African regulators still playing catch-up, or do you think that they are well on their way to adopting new innovation and technologies, such as the metaverse?
Thank you, KK. I think that's sort of like a pertinent question for where we are today. And I'm going to sort of like approach this question from the perspective of the extended reality technologies, which I consider the gateway technologies for the metaverse. And I'll have to say that first, if you're talking about extended reality on the African continent, if you've been playing the space in any way, shape, or form, you probably know that there are a number of challenges that are widely recognized. Some classic examples, the infrastructure you need. If you look at the situation with electricity and connectivity for much of the continent, you know that we have a really long way to go. Another example would be funding. When people have spoken about the extended reality technologies and that space, and by extension, the metaverse, you will usually hear a lot of talk about the billions and billions that's being put into these technologies, right? And I have to say that if you look over the last decade, even though the numbers were astronomical in North America and Asia and Europe, less than 1% of that was coming to the African continent. And that has to shift significantly. And another area where I think we have challenges are with looking at things like access to the hardware. If you are looking at a technology like virtual reality, for example, I think you'll find that the majority of big tech companies whether it's the Microsoft HoloLens or the Meta Quest 2, are not pieces of equipment that you can readily find on the African continent because they are not sold locally. If you do get your hands on them, it will be because somebody has shipped them in, or that you are able to go abroad and bring them into the country wherever you are. Now, what that means is that by the time you get your hands on it, you will likely have paid almost double what somebody in London or New York or some other city in another part of the world would pay. And I think that when you consider that against the backdrop of the purchasing power of, the majority of currencies on the continent, you see that we have a real problem that, just in terms of access, which I think we have to think critically about addressing. I want to sort of go back a second to the point that I was making about funding. And I said that, less than 1% historically had come to the continent. But I should say that, there is change happening now, certainly with the sort of last 12 months and all of the focus that there has been on the metaverse. And, even just before that, we were starting to see little inroads. Microsoft, for example, has opened an Africa Development Center that has bases in Lagos and in Nairobi. And what that means, which is very exciting for the space, is that there are mixed reality engineering teams on the continent. Meta, for example, when they made their game-changing announcement in October of 2021, went ahead to announce, significant sums that they were going to invest in research for XR and for the metaverse. And we are seeing some of that funding come to the African continent. So change is starting to happen, but it's just a little bit. Now, I mentioned all of this as a backdrop, sort of going into the space of looking at regulation and really what a government should be doing, because as we can see, it's a real challenge. If you want to play in the XR space, if you want to play in the metaverse space, you do have quite a few hurdles to surmount. And for me, the question will always be, what can African governments do to incentivize the space? Because I think if there's one thing that everybody is more or less, even if they're not shouting it out from the rooftops yet, but if there's one thing they're starting to realize is that there's no going back. This is an inevitable future for humanity. So the real question will then be, how do we get to really play? How do we get to define it for ourselves? And I think then that we have to have governments that are saying, how do we incentivize this? What is it that we need to do to be able to encourage young talent to, get involved? And I mentioned talent here, and that is another critical juncture for these technologies, because if you look at sort of skill levels on the continent, you know that we are playing catch up in that regard. Our academic institutions, by and large, are really not providing sort of the resources and knowledge to upskill our young people. A lot of the talent that you will see out there, for the most part, are self-taught, which is fantastic. And, it's a great thing that the University of YouTube, for example, exists. But I think that we need to take a more structured and formal approach to this if we are to achieve sort of the standards that we need to, if we are to really gain the prominence that we need to with this metaverse, particularly to be able to leverage it for, our own needs on the continent and obviously to serve the rest of the world.
I love what you said about us moving forward. Essentially, there's no going back. We're going to go on a quick commercial break, and then we're going to be right back to continue our conversation with Judith. Thank you so much for sticking with us. Welcome back. We're still in conversation with Judith. We've established why Africa needs to enter the metaverse. So now let's look at the how. So the typical challenges remain affordability, connectivity, and so on. How are these challenges limiting the possibilities that could come out of the metaverse, Judith, in your own opinion?
Thank you, KK. I mean, that question, I think, should be top of mind for us. What exactly does it mean with all of these challenges that we have? I think that, if you try to do anything in the XR space, particularly if you're looking at the more advanced applications, some things will stand out. One is that, there's a real shortage of talent. And if you think about sort of the full production, sort of life cycle for a high-end XR experience, that has CG elements, then that, you're thinking about not just your XR developers, for example, you're thinking about modelers, animators, you're thinking about sort of like spatial UI and UX, all of that. And we definitely don't have enough talent when it comes to that. And I think that for me, that means that we are limited in the sorts of solutions that we're seeing. We're also limited in how fast we can adopt these technologies locally and start to address some of the grand challenges that we have on the continent. The other thing I would say as well, funding is made available particularly for sort of like research and development and more sort of like experimental work, then that will allow us to not only play in the space, but help to define what it will be for the rest of the world. Because the exciting thing about this is that, it's still emerging. We're still trying to figure it out. And I think that African voices must be part of that, must be part of defining what it will be.
Absolutely. I love the point you made about just needing infrastructure that will help us develop, whatever digital world we want to create on the metaverse, right? The infrastructure has to first exist in the physical world before it can be taken over into the digital world. So I have one last question for you. What does progress look like when it comes to addressing these challenges, especially in relation to the metaverse? And how can we bridge the gap to bring progress a little bit closer? And I would like you to maybe touch on how partnerships and collaborations can help us to drive progress.
Okay, that's the perfect question, because really what we should all be thinking about is how do we move forward? So one thing that I would say is that, particularly with the, extended reality ecosystem, one thing that I would always hear around the world is people saying, there is no information, there is no data, we have no idea what's going on the African continent. What can we do about that? And I'm really pleased to say that there's currently an initiative going on called the Africa XR Report, which is a real survey of the landscape across Africa to find out as much as we can about what's going on and to make that publicly and freely available for everyone. So that's the first thing. Let there be data, right? Let there be data for us, by us, that we can use to know what's what, and even to figure out how we move forward. The other thing is that, I think with that data, we can now move to the stage where we're making many more informed decisions. And I hope that the kind of decisions that we will see are, more choices about providing learning opportunities for these technologies and learning opportunities that are embedded in our formal learning institutions. I think that that will make a huge difference. The other thing that is an offspring of like this data being available is that like awareness starts to build up, right? More people will find out about these technologies, about the metaverse, and they can start to say, okay, how can I get involved? What does this mean? Who can I engage with as well? All of that starts to be surfaced. And I think with all of that, you then have certainly with this wave of sort of like metaverse engagement from big tech, a lot of organizations saying, okay, so what should we do? I think we are starting to move away from, the sort of like closed off space that we had where a lot was like limited to Silicon Valley or to Asia. China's the world's biggest XR market, or other parts of the world. Now everybody, and I think this follows on a lot of what happened during the pandemic, the fact that we all moved, to the virtual space, the fact that the Black Lives Matter movement like shook the world. Now everybody has to be, a little bit more rigorous in their approach to, inclusivity and access. And I think that's opening up things a lot more for the world. So it's to capitalize on that and build the meaningful partnerships that will then advance things. What those partnerships might look like, I envision that big tech companies will do the investments like we've seen. I previously mentioned Microsoft's Africa Development Center, but also starting to partner much more closely with ecosystem developers who have been doing a lot of the groundwork for the last several years, because, really they have like a lot of the knowledge. How can they build on that to take things further? I think we'll start to see engagement from government. Those partnerships have to happen. And I hope, that very soon soon, we will see a scenario where all of these different stakeholders are coming together to start to sort of like connect with each other, engage, and figure out a way to move forward together.
Thank you so much. I think the two watchwords for us this year are inclusivity and access. We really appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us, Judith. Now, for you, Mick, my question is around adopting or entering the metaverse. How we're seeing big tech companies such as Facebook and MTN rebrand in line with their vision of the metaverse. So what does this mean for the digital economy in Africa and globally? And how does it influence younger, newer players in the tech industry? What else do these rebranding trends tell us about the future of technology on the continent?
Well, what's really exciting is that when a company as big as Facebook rebrands its name to Meta, you know it's something that is pretty important. And it's for a company that is so forward-thinking like them to rebrand themselves. And you know, they have a big vision and bold plans. And what we're seeing is that there are going to be many metaverses being created with different rules of the game and different ways of building and sharing within different communities. But who will be the main metaverse where everyone goes, no one knows yet. And which rules will apply the best, it's still pretty open. However, what is great about what's happening is that these companies are giants and help fund these initiatives, like we were just discussing earlier. And MTN has actually purchased a village within AfricaRare.io, which is Africa's first metaverse. And MTN will be building out a unique experience within AfricaRare, Ubuntu Land, which is really exciting to think that you know, one of Africa's biggest brands are taking this very seriously and are entering the metaverse and are making a claim that they are going to do something for the future of all Africans. And it's very exciting for all of us that are building in this space and are creating new types of experiences and new business models. And we're going to see, I believe that we're going to see a huge amount of the future of work will be done within AfricaRare and other metaverses, where Africans will be earning their salaries, working for people anywhere in the world in the metaverse. And they'll be able to do multiple jobs and be multi-skilled. The beautiful thing about the metaverse is that you enter as a 3D avatar. In AfricaRare Ubuntu Land, you come in as a Ubuntu lander and as part of a tribe. And you can be, you know, a pink elephant in the morning, and you can be working, playing a game, earning your money. And then a bit later, you can come in as, you know, a yellow fox, whatever, or maybe not an animal, maybe it's some type of royal family member of a tribe. And you can come in and you can, you know, create some type of business around a service or offering that, you know, maybe you're a psychologist and you can have a psychology session, you know, as a yellow fox helping somebody else. So what we're doing as AfricaRare, we're about to launch our psychology rooms where you can go on and book a psychologist and have a one-on-one, totally private session with a psychologist. And we're starting this initiative to try assist the people of Ukraine or anyone who's been affected by the war there, to try help them. So we can have local African psychologists now helping people in the Ukraine. And this is happening within the next couple of weeks. So it's all possible and it's all happening. And it allows us to think about how many new roles and how many new jobs can we be part of and can we take part of, and how many different perspectives can we actually put ourselves into, because we come in as different avatars wearing different shoes and different mindsets. So the metaverse can allow us to have multiple perspectives and multiple jobs, and we're going to need to upskill ourselves as Africans and as people of the world to learn these new skills and to do multiple jobs in the metaverse.
Those are some really insightful points, Mick. I love what you said about the endless possibilities that exist on the metaverse. Thank you so much for sharing them with us. And thank you to our guests, Judith and Osinachi, for joining us as well. And for everyone who tuned into the Next Wave today, we really appreciate you. And essentially, this is a wrap. Remember that the Next Wave is brought to you by TechAval. Next week, we'll talk about why infrastructure is key to building Africa's digital future. Don't miss it. Save the date. And remember, you can tweet at us using the hashtag NextWaveCNBC. You can also send in your feedback about this episode to the nextwave@techabal.com. Thank you again, and see you in the next episode.